Trystie's Quest, or Kit, King of the Pigwidgeons. By Greville MacDonald. Chapter 18. Trystie meets her godmother, she sees many wonders, the rainbow curtain, the yaw, she reaches Gallybird's hole. Trystie still sat in the dark stable rocking that a manger-like cradle with the wonderful baby in it. She watched the starry aureole about his head, and looked now and again through the gaping chink in the weatherboarding at the sunny grass and the little fairy, dusty with yellow pollen, laughing and swinging in her buttercup. The long stalk of the shining flower swayed up and down and kept time with the cradle's rocking, while the fairy, with her green diaphanous wings folded round her like a long garment, held tightly with her pink baby hands to the yellow petals of her throne, singing this tiny song: "Downward I swing, tickle my toes on the spikelets of green, up again fling, laughing farewell to the emerald sheen. Tightly I cling, clasping my petals so golden and clean, needing no wing. Blue sky and green earth the joy flies between. Swing to and fro. Who is it asks me his dew cup to share? Why yes or no? Why should I wed while I swing in the air? In the hedgerow. Roses bow down to me, daisies they stare. Down far below, swinging's far sweeter than cradles and care. You darling, silly fairy thing," exclaimed Trystie out loud. "What do you know about cradles and care?" As though a cradle with its own baby in it was not the loveliest flower that ever grew in all the world. Then the door opened and the dark stable was immediately so full of light that Trystie could hardly see, though she knew it was her godmother who stood before her. It was in another of her palaces that the child had last seen her, on that occasion indeed when the queen had given into her care Princess Honeypot, just before Iron Curdie had the terrible battle with those shocking cuttlefish. Now she stood for one moment looking like the beautifulest mother ever seen, taller and stronger than Trystie's own mother, and only lovelier because, folded softly on her back, reaching above her head and down to her bare, shining feet, were two great wings. They were so soft indeed that you could hardly see where they began and where they ended. They were part of her grace and herself. They shone like the limpid colors of the rainbow. When they were stretched their widest, only those of her subjects who were nearest her heart, however far away they might be, could see them. More people see them than know it. When they see a strip of rainbow, it is often just a great feather at the tip of one wing, and the rain that then falls in the sunshine is of the same nature as the great river of Fairyland. Glorious as the queen now stood before her, Trystie did not hesitate a moment. She just jumped up from the stool she had been sitting upon and ran into the loving arms. And in that moment the child grew into her womanhood, and, with her childhood and her womanhood strong about her, she went into the very heart of life. Her godmother lifted her, and held her close to her bosom as though she were a baby again. Then she sat down on the stool by the cradle, her wings softly all over everywhere, Trystie explains to us, and, with her godchild in her lap nestling close to her, she began rocking the cradle and talking to her somehow without many words. "Trystie, child," she said, "I want you to do something for the children you and I love, as well as finding the iron chest where the choose keys are hidden, something to do that I need you for, something I hardly know how to do without my big godchild. Will you do it?" "Oh, godmother," exclaimed Trystie, made so happy at these words, "of course I will. When shall I? Tell me about it." "The only way to tell you about it is to let you learn for yourself. I will show you some things about my castle. It is your castle too, everybody's, so that you can learn what it is you must do. Come, my child." The queen rose, and the two looked at the baby who, though he had been sleeping again, now opened his deep blue eyes and held out his little arms. "May I take him?" asked Trystie. "Yes, dear child, he is your savior," answered the queen. So Trystie, holding the aureoled baby close in her arms, followed her godmother. They went through another door into a great barn. Here there were so many cradles about, each with a sleeping, softly breathing baby in it, that Trystie could not count them. Then there were quite as many nests of all kinds with eggs in them, each built in a little fairy apple tree, or rose bush of its own. The eggs were transparent, so that the little curled-up chicks could be seen within, fast asleep. Again, in strange, dainty cradles of all shapes and colors, lay chrysalids, and within them could be seen, also in patient sleep, the butterflies or moths with of wings. In still smaller places of safety, shaped like treasure houses, lay, waiting and asleep, infant flowers, within which again were the beginnings of fruits, and, in the very heart of these, little sparks of magic which in due time would become treasure houses and begin the everlasting miracle over again. "Godmother! Godmother!" exclaimed Trystie. "Oh, Godmother! This, Trystie," said the Queen, "is my audience chamber, my nursery, the chamber of living sleep. Within its secret lie all things that live. Out of its secret come all that is miraculous joy and triumph, I mean, beauty of wing and song, boy and girl, mother love, father love, and the Savior baby in your arms. Some mortal people would call it the chamber of death, but they are ignorant and unfaithful to their mothers. It is eternally the chamber of sleep." "I understand, Godmother," said Trystie, and kissed the baby in her arms. Then they went out into the garden. It was full of children of all ages sitting under shady lime trees beset by happy bees. It was school time. The teaching was all done so naturally and so happily. "You see, Trystie," said the Queen, "as soon as any child has really learned anything, that thing becomes alive, and must get out and be given to everybody else who needs it. So the 4-year-olds, as soon as they have really learned something, not sums and multiplication tables, but things alive, such as helping and hoping and how to see inside the outsides, teach the 2-year-olds, and the 6-year-olds teach the 4-year-olds, and so on. And when the girls are grown up and have babies to look after, the babies teach them more lessons, just as the Savior baby is now teaching your heart far more things than you would ever find in schoolbooks or museums or all the libraries in the world." "Oh, Godmother," again said Trystie, this time in a low whisper, as if the joy were too great for telling. "Now, Trystie, my godchild, you are needed for my work, needed to save Kit and Davy and Curdie." "Kit and Davy and Curdie!" exclaimed the child, turning in dismay to the Queen. She had not yet realized the gravity of what the lark had told her. "Tell me. Let me go. Yet I must seem to leave you, child. For you must take my river with you into the land where the people say there are no such things as water and thirst. You must get out of the full river in which you are living and breathing, in which you found the Savior baby, or you could not find the dark place where the 2 brave boys and Curdie are prisoners and nearly dying of thirst. Nor could you reach the iron chest. Dying of thirst. I thought Kit was king. Oh, Godmother, don't leave me. Never will you be far away from me, child, for though you will have to get out of my river, you will carry it with you wherever you go. Now, goodbye. But I think you will have to come back again to me before you have courage enough to find the boys and Curdie. If you are very, very brave, you will be in time." The Queen took her godchild in her arms again and kissed her. Then Trystie stood alone in a dark place. Her arms no longer held the baby. But the sweet singing river was all about her, though she could not do anything but weep and weep for some minutes. Then she heard her godmother's voice. "Trystie, dear child, whenever you are in difficulty and catch sight of ever so small a rainbow, ever so small a feather of one, just step inside it, and you will be under my wing." "Yes, indeed, indeed I will, Godmother," Trystie said with the last of her sobs. Then she began to run along because there was something strong and sweet within her that made her brave for the boys and her quest of the choose keys. Now certain things began to happen which were of great importance to herself and her world and all of us who belonged to her. They are not easy for her to describe. They were so much the kind of things that are inside, and can't be easily told about because they have no exact outside by which they can be known. She makes this clear to herself by remembering that, though she never actually saw the fairy river, she knew, through the way it made things grow, that it was quite real. The bigger and more beautiful they grew, the thirstier for more of it they seemed to become. The day grew very dark. The banks of the river ceased to be green and flower-decked. There were no trees overhead, no clouds or stars to be seen. The bed of the river was hot under her bare feet. There were no fishes or birds, not even frogs. Often the stones would turn over in front of her, and a black snake would dart its head at her, shooting out a black tongue and showing long rows of black teeth. They all hissed the same things: "There is no river but in your silly mind." Or a great scorpion would wriggle out of a hole and brandish its horrid tail to make her turn back. But, though again and again she had to shut her eyes because the ugliness hurt them so sharply, she just pitied the lying creatures. Were they not, because they had no thirst, outside the river? She ran faster and faster, not from fear of the things she left behind, but from hope of those before her, the hope of reaching and bringing drink to the 2 darling boys and Curdie. The road grew rougher and blacker with great deep cracks into which she fell again and again. It grew fearfully hot. Soon nothing at all could be seen. Then the noise of falling waters was all about her, just like giant rain pouring upon a giant tree, Trystie said, and streams of sweet cool water were running down upon her, as if from giant leaves, so that her nightgown was wet and clinging to her. Now she had to feel her way because of the darkness. Presently she saw in front of her a dim round disk of light. She thought it was the moon at first, but it quickly got bigger and brighter till she came right up to it, and found it was a great hole in a wall before her, framed in a rough black border. Bad air seemed to be coming out of it together with the dim light. That she must go inside that hole, she knew. The lower edge of the hole came up to her knees. She leaned over to look how she must go. Instantly she drew back, and began to shiver and shake with the horror of what she had seen. It was the sight of an ugliness, greater than any child ever saw before, that shook her. The ugliness seemed to rise and strike her eyes, making her for one moment feel that the river was dried up within her, that she too had no thirst, that all she had seen and learned and loved at home and in fairyland was mockery. But she can never find words to tell exactly what it was she saw. Probably it cannot and should not be told. It was, of course, Gallybird's hole into which she looked, but, amidst all the disgust and vileness of the place, she saw no one she loved, and did not even think the boys and the dog could be there. At this, the very worst moment in all her life, Trystie saw shining across the dark hole dim but quite clear a bit of the rainbow looking like a fluttering curtain. In a moment she knew that her only chance of saving the boys and winning her quest was to get for one moment through the sevenfold colors into the river, and then, in obedience and trust, to step out of it, even though it might be into the very horror that had shaken her and endangered the fairy river. Little wonder is it that the brave child began to weep yet again, but only for one moment. In the next, with her right hand and arm she climbed on to the edge of the crater and into the dim curtain of rainbow light. Instantly she found herself once more in her godmother's arms. For perhaps half a minute no longer the queen held her and covered her over with her wings. Then she said, "Trystie, I am proud of my brave godchild. Lose no time now. Take this silver ewer and never let it leave you. Go into the kitchen and fetch the boys 2 mugs, and the carved bowl. Stay and comfort your mother. Then come back again." She kissed her again. "Go now." Then Trystie, quite naturally, took just 2 steps into the kitchen at the farm. Her mother was sitting with her head in her arms on the table, looking like despair. Trystie felt she could not speak directly to her. She must, nevertheless, give her some words of comfort about the boys, even though she knew no more than one thing about them, namely, that the queen was taking care of them. This was, indeed, just the sort of occasion when music will say things which have no utterance in common words. So Trystie continued the song that had risen to her lips as she rocked the cradle. When the storm is undone, the sky blossoms red in the west, then birds, one by one, come home, in the treetops to rest. In the grave buried deep, the lonely seed opens her eye, forgets the dark sleep, and lifts up 2 green arms on high. No child can be lost, for hope will bring back the old joy. Though hoary with frost he shouts from his heart, "Spring ahoy!" Though waves leap and roar, brave hope's gallant ship will prevail. Though storms beat the shore, T's trust fills the homecoming sail. Then, without another word, the child took down from the dresser 2 mugs and the carved bowl. With one more look at her mother, and holding the ewer in her right hand, the wooden bowl with the 2 mugs in it under the same arm, she left the kitchen by the garden door. By which same door she went, step by step, down into Gallybird's hole. But before she had time to look about her, she knew she was holding in her own left the soft hand of some little person. End of this chapter.